The analysis fixates on the spectacle, the Hwasong 17, the launch vehicle, a visible projection of kinetic intent. This is a deliberate misdirection, designed for a media cycle that rewards fire and noise. This obsession with symmetric threats is a critical error. The mathematical certainty of conventional inferiority forces a weaker actor into an asymmetric protocol. The real vector is not the warhead, it is silence. CSIS reports confirm the strategic targeting of subsea data conduits. This is not about cutting off internet access for civilians. It is about severing the central nervous system of global finance and military command and control. Trillions in liquidity, frozen. Asset locations, blinded. The secondary vector is orbital. Analysts at RUSI have detailed the operational capability for satellite blinding, using ground-based lasers to permanently or temporarily disable imaging and communication relays. The eyes are targeted before the fist is ever thrown. The objective is not attrition, it is paralysis. To create a blind leviathan, a state with overwhelming kinetic power but zero sensory input. A carrier group with a launch-on-warning posture, suddenly deaf and dumb, becomes a systemic liability. Its strength is weaponized against itself. This is the blueprint for 21st century systemic shock. The conflict was never about territory. It is a solvency crisis. CSIS analysis confirms that the kinetic cost of a prolonged symmetric war becomes a terminal domestic liability. Public support erodes. The treasury drains. When a state cannot afford the price of a conventional victory, its leadership faces a mathematical certainty: find a new target or collapse from within. Weakness forces a pivot to asymmetry. The primary objective shifts from military attrition to systemic destabilization. The protocol is to transform your conventional inferiority into a weapon against the global system itself. The target is no longer the adversary's front line. It is their economic and social cohesion. This is not a failure of strategy. It is the execution of a different one. This is the blueprint for modern systemic risk. A weaker actor cannot win a direct fight, so they are forced to attack the vulnerabilities of the interconnected world. Iran can target global trade. A minor state can launch a crippling cyber attack on public infrastructure, as seen in the UK. North Korea uses its Hwasong 17 as a strategic lever of deterrence. This is why the EU's push for a combined military force is not posturing. It is a desperate attempt to climb out of the zone of conventional weakness that makes this asymmetric escalation inevitable. The economic calculus of lethality has inverted. The math is the entire story. The Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, frames the new kinetic cost exchange ratio with chilling clarity. A $5 million main battle tank, the anchor of conventional land power, is now a liability. It can be identified, targeted, and neutralized by a $500 commercial drone. This is the democratization of violence in its purest form. It is not a theory, it is a market reality. The financial barrier to entry for projecting strategic kinetic force has effectively collapsed. This protocol grants any conventionally weaker actor a systemic accelerant, transforming economic disparity into asymmetric leverage. An economically cornered state no longer needs a billion-dollar air force to impose a solvency crisis on its opponent. It needs a shipping container of cheap electronics. The math dictates that it is no longer about winning on the battlefield. It is about making the cost of engagement for a stronger power economically unsustainable. The primary battlefield is no longer a geographic location. It is a condition of systemic weakness. We are trained to look for tank columns and aircraft carriers, but the kinetic cost is too high for the weaker actor. The true battle space is the gray zone, regions of calculated instability used as proxy laboratories for systemic attacks. A UK council's digital infrastructure is taken offline. Reports from Cyber Magazine frame it as a local failure, a public sector risk. This is a misdiagnosis. The attack vector is global, launched from servers staged in jurisdictions where attribution is a mathematical impossibility. These are not random hacks. They are low-cost probes to test the vulnerabilities of Western civil architecture. Analysts at RUSI and CSIS issue warnings about rising instability in nations like South Africa, or even internal logistical fractures in Canada. Legacy media reports this as local news. This is incorrect. These locations are symptoms, not the cause. They represent the emergence of new staging grounds, low-friction environments for state and non-state actors to develop and deploy asymmetric protocols against global solvency and infrastructure. Every regional crisis is a potential laboratory. Every failed state is a potential launch pad. The goal is not to conquer territory, but to weaponize the system's own interconnectedness against itself. This is the blueprint for how a regional power without a blue water navy attacks global trade, or how an isolated state without a peer air force executes a systemic digital strike. They use the gray zone as a liability shield. The launch-on-warning doctrine is not policy. It is a mathematical protocol triggered by the threat of decapitation. The logic is zero-sum. If an adversary's first strike is successful, your ability to retaliate is reduced to zero. Therefore, the instant a credible threat is detected, you launch. Waiting for kinetic impact is not an option. This is where the protocol becomes a systemic liability. Analysts at RUSI confirm that a cyber attack engineered to blind early warning radar creates the fog of digital war. The commander is presented with a binary choice, devoid of reliable data. Option 1, assume it is a system error and risk the total annihilation of your strategic assets. Option 2, assume the no signal is the signal, that a stealth attack is underway, and execute the launch protocol. In this scenario, fear is not an emotion. It is a tactical input. The system is designed to default to the worst-case scenario, transforming a sophisticated cyber attack into the accelerant for a full-scale nuclear exchange. This isn't a flaw. It's a feature of deterrence in the digital age. The calibration shot is not a missile launch. It is a data packet. The next 12 months will see a targeted, attribution-impossible logistics paralysis at a major deep-water port. The vector will be a zero-day exploit targeting its terminal operating system, masquerading as a catastrophic software update failure or a sophisticated ransomware attack. CSIS has documented that port authorities represent a critical public sector vulnerability, a principle demonstrated in attacks on assets like the UK Council. The kinetic cost will be zero. The economic cost, a multi-billion-dollar solvency event, will be the message. This is not an act of war. It is a mathematical proof of concept delivered to the global system. It demonstrates the capability to decouple critical infrastructure from its protectors, weaponizing the very interconnectedness that actors like the EU, with their plans for a combined military force, seek to defend. The signal's purpose is to prove that the price of symmetric conflict is infinitely higher than the cost of systemic disruption.